Hey everyone, it's Shagar, the Half-Orc Bandit. I just had some thoughts about the new UA that I wanted to put out. One thing for sure is that the new classes are like a bit more spirited and inspired than previous UAs. A lot of the time we tend to get this class gets flying, or this class gets THP, and it wasn't as much as that this time. It shows a positive change in the right direction. The Titan background, or the Titan Druid, is a refreshing take on what you could change into. It gets outside the beast modes. It allows you to turn into full-on monstrosities, but there is some underwhelming parts about this. For example, the hit points and AC of a Titan Druid who is supposed to be turning into something like a Godzilla or Mothra or Kraken is significantly less than a Moon Druid turning into a brown bear. Likewise, the attack power, crit, armor class, and AC are also kind of a bit more lackluster. You could say that this made up for the fact that they get some certain special abilities and can go as far as even doing like AoE attacks and do some swallow some opponents. But the problem is, once you have been swallowed, even with disadvantage, you become the single target of that creature, and you don't have the resources to back it up. You'll have, on average, about maybe 120 HP in the around 14th level when you get this ability. And that is including the THP that they get. The Hell Knight is a little bit underwhelming, given that it is basically a flame-themed fighter, and fire is pretty heavily resisted. One of the biggest things that is being critiqued, however, is a flavor ability at the capstone, which gives this 18th level fighter the effective effect of a Hellfire weapon, a common magic item, at the late level. They, of course, also get a different feature, but I'm not sure if it makes up for being in the endgame on the fire. It allows you to treat any one rolled on the d6 for their gimmick called Infernal Wounds, which allows them to proc some of their previous abilities more often. It's not bad overall, but with fire being one of the most heavily resisted types, it's a bit lackluster. I actually like the Abyssal Sorcerer. Some people have also kind of pointed the finger that it needed a little bit more time to cook. This is less that you are like a demon magic kind of thing, and more that you are channeling the chaotic energies of the plane itself, and it manifests this pretty well with the fact that your sorcerer pretty much alters everything around them and can alter themselves in some unpredictable ways. Overall, the theming is pretty good. And don't get me started about the Pestilence Cleric. They heckin' cooked on this one. A cleric that uses plague and disease to try to subdue the enemy, making extensive use of the exhaustion mechanic, which hasn't been very well explored by WotC so far. I was actually really glad to see that there was some passion and energy put into this. Granted, it's not without fault. One of the things that I'm a little concerned about are the new villainous paths, which are meant to be like paragon paths or prestige classes that you take by taking feats. The Lich path is a little bit underwhelming and kind of breaks down if you're a class that uses pack slots or some alternative form of casting. I am a person who really well favors third-party content, so there have been some different explorations of spellcastings that wouldn't really work with this. But on the topic of third-party content, the major reason why I'm a little bit concerned about these paragon paths, if you would like to call them that, is that they kind of step on the toes of some third-party content that is already purchased and available by WotC. And it has only been about 3 years since the OLG crisis. Well, one of the big stopping points is that one of the things we fought against was that third-party content creators really couldn't kick up a stink if ever WotC took their content or took content and made something similar to it. This was among many talking points that grew heated in the community, and ever since with the OLG, they kind of backed down, sort of, in some of these more opportunistic practices, but they pitted it into a way that is potentially even more problematic. It goes without saying that other websites like DriveThruRPG and the DM's Guild are slowly being inundated with content that is AI produced and not as well maintained or well placed. This means D&D Beyond becomes the premier place to sell content and is even drawn in the attention of competing companies like Kaizo and Chaosium. So now, if you want to be able to make a decent amount of headway, you kind of have to go onto D&D Beyond. And one part of that is that a third-party content creator has to agree for Wizards of the Coast to take a pretty significant cut. If I remember correctly, it was around 33%. I'll have to fact check that later, and if I made a mistake, I will apologize in the comments. But bar none, Wizards of the Coast gets a cut of every product sold on D&D Beyond. And now, the new transformations that are being put forth by Wizards of the Coast seem like a less spirited version of what they got from Grim Hollow, which has produced several third-party content products onto D&D Beyond. And now they're having something that is produced that is similar in the same vein. Just like with what Wizards of the Coast's new UA, Ghostfire Games had previously produced transformations which were required, giving you certain perks, but at the same time had the drawbacks of having certain flaws, so starting to become a witch, a fae, celestial, whatever have you, like vampires. Now you have a new official first-party version of these transformations, which will mean the need for the third-party version of these transformations will become less significant, therefore getting into the revenue of Ghostfire Games, in which they're already giving up some portion of their revenue by selling on the platform. I find this to be a little bit agitating. Anytime that you produce something, months later, it is possible that Wizards of the Coast could produce something that renders your product obsolete. I know this is a little bit rambly and a little bit unfocused, but I am excited for the products. I am somebody who tries to stay in love with 5e. I have since branched out into other TTRPGs because WotC's business practices and their products have been kind of lacking. And to the point that a lot of my 5e purchases have been third-party content recently. And I am in the process of developing third-party content myself. So it gives me a bit of pause when I see that if I produce something that is somewhat appealing to the crowd, there is a good chance that Wizards of the Coast can produce something that kind of renders what I'm making obsolete without me having much recourse for trying to make up the difference there. And this process has been, this process of getting exclusive content or producing new content has been kicking up pace. And it's also to the point where sometimes the exclusive rights to that content is WotC only. Take the very popular Crooked Mirren. It was a product that was, I believe, kickstarted, but has since been relaunched and produced onto the D&D Beyond platform. But it is only able to be sold on the D&D platform. which means if ever Wizards of the Coast pulls the plug on D&D Beyond, people who have bought Crooked Moon will then lose access to their content. And this is a third-party content, like a third-party producer who can only sell this on their platform. They can't go anywhere else by contract. So if down the line, Wizards of the Coast produce something of the same vein, Crooked Moon could barely have any leg to stand on in which their content might be replaced by future Wizards of the Coast content. Trying to understand that I'm not trying to bash the decisions. I'm more just concerned to the trends that I'm seeing. This kind of a return to the form of the ELG crisis, but it's being swept under the rug. I am excited for the new direction of the subclasses, but I wish it didn't come at the cost of potentially eating into another great developer's area. Along the lines, like in addition to having all of this content kind of step on the toes of Ghost Hire Games, I have received from him interestingly, like a credible source, that Wizards of the Coast also has hired some of the staff that we used to be working at Ghostfire Games, which might explain the similarities as well. I'm just hopeful that there is room for their party to grow without having to worry whether or not their own products will become obsolete. Anyway, this has been a rambly video about my concerns about the new direction of some of the UAs. These concerns might be unfounded, and I still do enjoy the hobby. I'm not trying to badmouth Wizards of the Coast. I'm just a little bit worried that third-party content creators might have their niches continue to shrink, especially if the dependence on D&D Beyond grows. This is Shaga, the Half-Orc Bandit. Have a good evening.